Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we will dive into Poppy Playtime. I know I've never covered this game on my channel, but since Chapter 3 came out, I thought it was finally time for me to throw my hat in the ring. Being that this game is already up my alley, as in content-wise, I thought I'd make a video on it. But not only on the main antagonist of Chapter 3, but also all the other chapters as well. Now I assume all of you watching this video have seen Chapter 3 as well as Chapters 1 and 2, and as you know, in each chapter there's a main threat that the player has to avoid in order to survive usually. And at the end of each chapter, the threat is something the player defeats, and that's how the chapter usually ends. But these antagonists aren't just something to shrug off though. They each bring a unique experience to the player, interacting with them in different ways and making each chapter difficult but unique. I think everyone noticed when each chapter first came out, the main thread of that chapter was everywhere. Like every YouTube thumbnail already clued you in on what to expect when you play the chapter. Now then, it's time to take a look at each threat and each chapter and go through what you experience from each one of them. Also, keep in mind that I'm only going through the main thread of each chapter and not any side bosses or side threats or anything like that. But let's begin with our first antagonist, Huggy Wuggy. Huggy Wuggy is definitely what you would consider to be the poster child of Poppy Playtime. And even though we all know what he looks like now, whenever the first chapter of the game came out, everyone didn't really know what he looked like. Now, opposed to Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, the threat was not revealed right off the bat. And I'll explain more on that when I get to those chapters. But in Chapter 1, we enter Playtime Co. Then we explore the lobby before finding the grab pack and learning how it works. You then go to the big door where you first use the grab pack hand to open it. This is where the threat sits in. As soon as you open the door, we see Huggy Wuggy in all his glory. It doesn't even take Huggy Wuggy going nightmare mode for you to know that he will chase you down. His long furry body with his big smile already tells you that he is definitely something you should look out for. And once you turn on the power, he vanishes. From that point, you begin to wonder when Huggy Wuggy will appear again, and each puzzle you solve makes you fear for what will happen next. Huggy, after he disappears, never interacts with the player for a good part of the chapter. We see his arms sometimes, and that's about it. You really get a fear of awaited absence. You see, once you make the toy for the door scanner and go down the hallway to escape, Huggy Wuggy slowly appears from the dark abyss and begins chasing you down. He reveals his nightmare face, and it completely erases any ease his original face once had. It is then time for you to run into the vent. Now, being that Huggy Wuggy is long and lengthy, you wouldn't think that he'd be able to squeeze into the vent. But he does, and it's terrifying. You navigate your way through the vents while escaping Huggy Wuggy. Once you escape the vents, you run onto a catwalk where you pull a box to break the catwalk, and Huggy falls into the dark bottom of the factory. This is the last time you see Huggy Wuggy. I think that he is a great way to introduce the toys from the Bigger Bodies experiment. We don't know if he's really gone for sure, though. He is definitely a character that has a strong start to the series and a great beginning for Poppy Playtime. Mommy Longlegs is a little different. As opposed to Chapter 1, she is revealed at the beginning of the chapter in a way that is unique rather than just appearing out of nowhere. At the start of Chapter 2, an infomercial plays displaying the Mommy Longlegs toy and how it has long extendable arms and legs. This is a discreet but obvious way of showing you what the actual Mommy Longlegs will do. It keys you in before she actually appears. Something else that is different from Mommy Longlegs as opposed to Huggy Wuggy is that she gives off a false personality. I'll elaborate. You see, at the beginning of the chapter, Poppy, who we freed from the case in the first chapter, begins to guide us through these areas within these office spaces in the factory. It goes into the employees and the staff at Playtime Co. Eventually, we get to a door where we have to use our red hand to open it. But before we do that, unfortunately, Mommy Longlegs comes out of nowhere, not only ripping off our red hand, but also has kidnapped Poppy. Originally, Poppy was just going to give us the code for the train to escape, but Mommy Longlegs has the idea to make a game out of it. It is then the job of the player to beat all 3 games in order to receive the train code from Mommy Longlegs. You then go through 3 mini games that have some different challenge and a threat that you have to overcome to escape. Now what's different about Chapter 2 is that Mommy Longlegs is present during each game and pretty much for the whole chapter. She has a motherly positive feel for the first bit, but as we complete each game, she slowly descends into madness, realizing that her attempts to end us do not work. She can be seen in each game, usually in a blocked off area, observing us. She acts friendly for the majority of the chapter. You see, the player isn't at the feeling of not knowing when she's going to appear, but they do know that by beating each game, it is upsetting her. This gives a different kind of approach to being that this is the chapter where you get the most interaction from the antagonist. The chapter ends off by Mommy Longlegs hunting us down after we supposedly cheat against her. Before this, she was going as giving a vibe of not being hostile so that the player would trust her somewhat. Once we beat the last game, she realizes she has no way of making us stay and begins to go mad. We then have to run from her and we eventually end up killing her in a chipping machine. The initial jump from her character being hostile makes her chasing you much more frightening. Now her nightmare design is not too creepy as opposed to Huggy Wuggy. Regardless though, it is still pretty scary, and this makes killing her a big relief. Now it's time to dive into the character that the majority of you are waiting to hear about, CatNap. Out of all the threats I've talked about, CatNap is definitely the most unique. Now I'm sure by reading the title all of you know that, but the way that CatNap goes from his introduction to his random but subtle appearances in the chapter and his presence in each section, it really outdoes Mommy Longlegs and Huggy Wuggy. Whenever the chapter first begins, similarly to Chapter 2, the chapter uses an infomercial on VHS to introduce the threat. But instead of showing just a toy, we get a clip from the Smiling Critters show. All the critters are in a house trying to sleep, but the wind outside is frightening everyone and they can't go to sleep. Eventually, CatNap arrives at the door and all the critters tell CatNap to help them fall asleep. This is where the red smoke is introduced. It is then revealed that the actual CatNap toy produces red smoke and gives real kids terrible nightmares and hallucinations. The chapter begins by CatNap carrying the player and throwing them down a chute. This beginning is already different from chapters 1 and 2. From the beginning clips, we almost instantly know that something about CatNap is wrong. We learn of the red smoke and how the CatNap toy was the only one to get continued from the Smiling Critters series. And being that right after, we already get to see CatNap's long arms carrying us, that already introduces us to the threat in a much more scarier way. Probably one of the most clever things that I noticed is that they chose a cat out of all the animals. Being that cats are clever and kind of mischievous, this really fits CatNap's character. The thing that Chapter 3 does better than the first 2 chapters is that it takes both aspects from both of them and combines them to make them better. In Chapter 1, Huggy Wuggy really didn't interact with the player too much and appeared like once or twice. In Chapter 2, Mommy Longlegs interacted with the player quite a bit and gave a false sense of safety. And instead of CatNap being personal with the player and appearing all the time, CatNap appears rarely at frightening times, being in person or by the red smoke. Also, he is described by other characters and it makes him seem like the most threatening. Being that the characters like Miss Delight were afraid of him and like Poppy too, this already tells you that when you face him, he's going to be the worst. Now I think that both Huggy Wuggy and Mommy Longlegs are creepy characters, but I do not think they hold a candle to CatNap. CatNap's constant wide smile and eerie red smoke and lengthiness makes him definitely the most creepy. You also have the form that he takes up in the boss battle, which is even more unsettling than normal. To wrap this up, CatNap definitely has the most eerie presence, and the red smoke makes the chapter very unique. He takes the elements from past characters and enhances them complete by tenfold. And to be honest with you, CatNap definitely has shown a really good Chapter 3 for us, and I cannot wait for what Chapter 4 holds in store for us. But yeah guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay awesome, God bless, and peace.